are obviously far superior than me. You probably know much more Quran than I do. I wasn't brought up in a Muslim family. I just converted to Islam 10 years ago. Although I do look Pakistani, but I'm Greek. And my parents are Greek, and I converted to Islam. So I'm looking up to you. And I consider you my teachers regardless of what age you are from. So I think the only thing I want to tell you is just a little bit of advice. And as we know, the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, "Ad-deen nasiha," the deen is sincere advice. And this advice to myself and to yourself, because the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-mu'minu miratul mu'min." The believer is a mirror of another believer. So if I have a blemish on my face, I'm not going to wipe the mirror. I'm going to wipe myself. So indicating that we're one and the same thing. So the only thing I want to talk about is Al-Ikhlas. Al-Ikhlas is the most important thing. Wallahi, do not take it for granted in any shape or form. Ikhlas is actually the reason that what takes you to Jannah. Obviously it's the mercy of Allah Azza wa Jal, but it's the facilitating spiritual mechanism, if you like, that takes us there. Because without Ikhlas, we have nothing. Zero. For example, I could, take over the world, and I could become the Khalifa, and I could implement justice of Islam, and the Rahmah of Islam. I could bring humanity together, and make sure that all worship Allah Azza wa Jal, and on the Day of Judgment, I have nothing on my mizan. Absolutely zero. Nothing. And that's because I did it for fame, I did it for my ego, I did it for social pressure. I didn't do it for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal. And as you know, linguistically, al-Ikhlas means to single something out. And we need to single out Allah Azza wa Jal for our deeds, especially when we want them accepted. And we know Ikhlas is a vast topic, but generally it could mean that you're doing things just for the reward. That is still Ikhlas. You're doing it to remove yourself away from the punishment, or you're doing it just for the sake of Allah because you love Allah, you're doing it for all three. So that's Ikhlas. And we have to really be conscious and always take a snapshot of ourselves to always have the right intention and the right Ikhlas. The reason being is because in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal tells us that if we don't do deeds for His sake, it's like nothing. And there's a parable or a story or an analogy of a stone with dust on it. When it rains, where is the dust? So we actually gain nothing. And this is the highest elevated aspect of Islam. This is true spirituality, because we're doing the deed not for the limited nature of the self, of the carnal desires. We're not doing it for the ego. We're not doing it just because other people want us to do it for fame, because they're limited too. We're doing it for the transcendent, for the divine reality of Allah Azza wa Jal, the one who transcends everything. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٌ. And it's very important for us to do this. And there is no button you press and I have Ikhlas now. Even Sufyan al-Thawri, one of the famous scholars of Islam, he said, the one thing I worry about is my intention, is my Ikhlas. Because it lies in the heart, and the heart is the qalb. And the qalb is in that wavers, thing that boils over. So we always have to take a snapshot. So there are some lessons we take from this. That we have to understand our spiritual tradition as well, and see how can we fix our Ikhlas and engage with it. So I'll give you some advice. And it's to me as well. Do something every day for the sake of Allah that no one knows, besides the prayers. Do something for the sake of Allah Azza wa Jal that nobody knows except Allah, and you don't even mention it in the future. Do it every day. Then you start to develop your Ikhlas. Remind yourself that without Ikhlas, you have nothing. On the Day of Judgment, you'll be bankrupt. Absolutely bankrupt. Remind yourselves of the resultant punishment of not doing things for the sake of Allah, especially when it comes to key aspects of worship. And remind yourself very with intent that Ikhlas is going to be the facilitator to Jannah, eternal bliss. Which is the thing that we want, because this dunya is very, 60 years? 6 years for some. 16 years? 26 years? Well, Allahu A'lam, we don't know. There's a very short life. كُلُّ نَفْسٍ ذَلِكَ الْمَوْتِ. Every soul is going to taste death. So have these strategies, and every time you do a deed, don't do it mechanically. Take a snapshot of yourself and say, okay, let me remind myself, why am I doing this? Because sometimes we become mechanical, especially someone like me who speaks all the time or whatever we do. It's like, that's it, you're on speaker mode. But you have to just snap back and realize and say, wait, why am I doing this? For whom am I doing this? Why am I doing this? So please take this advice. I know it has nothing to do with your competition. But wallahi, this is probably the best advice that I heard, because someone taught me this. Shaykh Hazm al-Haddad taught us this. And I'm giving it to you as well. You probably know this already, but reminder benefits the believer. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you, wallahi azeem. And let me just give you a final thing. The beautiful thing about Ikhlas is that everything could become worship. Everything could become worship. Do you know that? Imagine you're married and you cook the same dish on a Monday for your husband. And you hate that dish. It stinks. It's a special type of Bengali fish, for example. And you're like, man, why do I have to cook this? It's the 30th year and I'm always cooking this, man, this rotten fish every Monday. Now, essentially, this could become a means of your Jannah and a means for ibadah. Why? Because if you started cooking that fish on the first week of the first year, not the 30th year, and you said, Ya Allah, I hate this fish, but wallahi, I'm doing it to seek your face, to glorify you, all those 30 years will be worship. Wallahi, if you drink some water, you have some food, and you know it's a necessity, you have to have it for your body, but you're doing it by having the intention, Ya Allah, I'm doing this as well, because I want to be a strong believer, I want to worship you in tahajjud, I want to come closer to you, I'm doing it to maintain my health because I want to live to worship you longer. If you have that sincerity in that action, every time you have breakfast, lunch and dinner, it will become a worship. That's the power of worship, ikhwan and akhawat. Be worshippers. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.